Hello, good morning and welcome. Welcome. We'll start momentarily, just waiting to let a few other participants in. Good morning. All right. It is 11:02, and for the purpose of a timekeeping, we will go ahead and start. Welcome and good morning. My name is Kamika Woodhouse Willis, one of the hiring managers here with RBIJ's Inclusive Hiring Team. We want to welcome everyone to the value of second chance hiring. The goal of today's session is to expand the network of businesses committed to hiring people who have been impacted by the justice system and also engage in conversation about the work of RBIJ and how business leaders and the wider community can get involved. So just to go over some of our objectives for today, in today's session, we are hoping that we can accomplish the following: effectively highlight the second chance hiring work being done here at RBIJ, lending a voice to the work by connecting like-minded individuals like yourselves who are currently engaged in inclusive hiring practices, as well as share policies across the three target states, and establish ways to engage with other businesses to build community. And for those that are not familiar with the work of RBIJ, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice and the different areas of our work. So at the center of our work is our inclusive hiring and policy and advocacy team. Our inclusive hiring team leads initiatives encouraging businesses to become inclusive hirers. This includes our groundbreaking initiative, Unlock Potential, and a program which is a program providing pathways to career opportunities and wraparound services to youth most at risk of incarceration. The second part of our work is our second chance hiring program, which is why we're kicking off this session today. This project's objective is to encourage businesses to actively hire individuals with criminal records, aiming to provide long-term impact through strategic engagement, partnerships, and overcoming potential challenges along the way. Next is our strategic engagement team. We actively work with both teams to recruit new businesses and keep our partners engaged in all areas of our work, including through the Workforce and Justice Alliance, WJA, a network of businesses committed to using their platforms, networks, and leverage advanced systemic change in the justice system and sharing best practices with their peers. Our communication team plays a vital role in all of our efforts here at RBIJ to create a narrative change. Our hope is to transition second chance hiring from concept to widespread practice by engaging and working with businesses like yourselves to provide support to implement second chance hiring policies. And to add further context to the policy work that we're doing, I'll have Morgan move forward to talk about the work that we're doing here at RBIJ with the policy team.
Thanks, Kamika. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan. I am the senior manager on the policy and advocacy team here at RBIJ. So for those of you who are less familiar with our work, the policy and advocacy team helps businesses use their voice, platforms, and leverage to move critical reform initiatives at both the state and federal level through public and private advocacy. Since its founding, RBIJ has worked in nearly half the U.S. states across nearly a dozen policy issue areas, including criminal record sealing known as Clean Slate, bail reform, expanding access to occupational licensings, juvenile life without parole, and ending the death penalty. So the way we do this work is by working in close consultation with local campaigners and advocacy organizations on the ground. From there, we identify the right business voices, like some of you on this call today, to engage on the issue. We arm you with the right messaging and then activate you at a strategic inflection point. Also that your voice has the most meaningful and lasting impact. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of all the policy work we're doing in the 3 focus states that we're talking about today. So in Georgia, we are working on occupational licensing reform. Earlier this year, there was a bill, Senate Bill 157. It passed the Senate unanimously, and it will get to pick up where it left off in the House in this upcoming 2024 session. So it's going to be critical for companies of all sizes to support its passage when this 2024 session begins in January. In Ohio, we are working on driver's license suspension reform. We have a bill there right now, SB 37. It's had 2 hearings and we're looking towards a 2024 vote and passage. We currently have a business sign-on letter in support of that bill. And just like in Georgia, it'll be critical to have business support in the coming session. And then in Texas, we are supporting Clean Slate. So Clean Slate Texas was introduced this year as House Bill 1737 and Senate Bill 499. The House bill passed the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee with 0 nays, and after 3 readings passed the House. Unfortunately, it was once it was sent to the Senate, the bill was kind of left pending in committee. However, we are hopeful for the next session, which begins in 2025. And just like the other 2 states, the business voice will be critical. So if you're interested in getting involved in your state on any of these issues, we are very happy to help identify meaningful ways to use your company's voice, whether that's publicly or privately. Please do not hesitate to reach out. We've had the pleasure of working with all 3 of today's panelists on policy, so you're definitely in for a treat. They are champions in policy and in second chance hiring. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them, and I'll pass it back to Kaz. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaz Walcott, Director of Inclusive Hiring here at RBIJ, and thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to introduce our panel, to have them introduce themselves. We're joined by 3 thought leaders and change agents who have supported various RBIJ initiatives to advance the work of inclusive hiring. So I'm going to pass over to our 3 panelists really quickly, just for them to give an introduction, and then we're going to kick off with our conversation. So I'll start with you, Harley, if you could introduce yourself quickly, then Megan and Rayshun.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I'm Harley Blakeman. I'm the founder and CEO of Honest Jobs. Honest Jobs is an online platform that helps companies hire justice-involved job candidates across the United States. So we represent a lot of companies doing that work. And then I'm also formerly incarcerated, was incarcerated for a little over a year when I was 19 years old in Georgia. So I have some connections to Georgia. I lived in Ohio for about 12 years, and now I'm actually currently living in Texas. So I have some connections to all of the states we're discussing today, and I'm really excited to be a part of this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Harley.
Hi, good morning. My name is Megan Mauro. I'm with the Texas Association of Business. So we are the State Chamber of Commerce for Texas. We represent businesses, small, medium, and large, and across every industry, but we also represent our local chambers across the state. And there are a lot of them because we're in Texas. So we really, want to share the voice of Texas as a whole, and our number 1 job at the state chamber is advocacy. So we advocate at the Capitol for business-friendly policies from tax, economic development, workforce, but we also have a criminal justice policy committee as well, because it's important for business. And we also have a foundation arm of our organization, and within that we house the Second Chance Employers Coalition, which I lead on as well. And happy to be here today.
Thank you, Megan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rayshun Holt. I work at Cincinnati Works. I lead an initiative here called Fair Chance Works, which includes management of the Beacon of Hope Business Alliance. Beacon of Hope is an ecosystem in the greater Cincinnati area committed to helping educate companies on best practices in regards to fair chance hiring, as well as getting formerly incarcerated individuals connected to these job opportunities. We have been around since 2016. We were founded by a company that really pioneered fair chance hiring, a company called Nehemiah Manufacturing. Myself being formerly incarcerated for a period of 21 years, was fortunate enough to get connected to that opportunity at Nehemiah and then to be able to lead the Beacon of Hope Business Alliance and Fair Chance Works. Great to meet everyone here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rayshun. As you can see, we have an amazing panel today. And I invite guests to drop questions in the Q&A box. And we'll have around 10 minutes towards the end to answer questions that have been dropped in the Q&A box. So I wanted to kick off with a really quick quote, and then I'm going to direct my first question to you, Harley. So last month, a US Chamber of Commerce report showed that we have 9.5 million job openings in the US alone and 6.5 million unemployed workers. So we have lots of jobs, but not enough workers to fill them. So that's 9.5 million job openings in the US, only 6.5 million individuals to fill them. So Harley, there's a lot of employers that are nervous about hiring individuals with criminal records for fear of legal action against them for negligent hiring. So even though we have this 9.5 million deficit in terms of, job openings and 6.5 million individuals to fill them, there's still a lot of employers that are nervous about hiring individuals with criminal records. Can you speak to the actuality of this risk?
Yes, I certainly can, and I'll probably share a little bit more anecdotal than heavy with the data, but there's multiple recent incredible organizations publishing the findings that lawsuits of negligent hiring, which is the primary legal action that employers are fearful about, is that you would hire someone. Let me make sure I'm on video as well, sorry. That if you hire someone with a record and they commit a crime, that you could be sued because you hired someone that you shouldn't have hired. That's kind of like the common fear, is that what if it backlashes on us and we're sued because we hired someone? The research out there shows that the actualities of that type of lawsuit happening are extremely low. Significantly lower than anyone would think. And in fact, the best practices for avoiding even that small risk, that tiny risk of it happening, are very easy to set up and implement. It's basically common sense, and there's so many organizations like RBIJ, but there's others as well that could give you a very simple framework to do this. But the reality is that we work, my organization is working with companies that are hiring dozens of people, and sometimes they're misdemeanors or low-level felonies from 7+ years ago, but then sometimes we're working with companies that are hiring people who are just home from prison 2 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and we've helped them hire hundreds of these people without a single example of a single, even a threat of a lawsuit, let alone an actual lawsuit. So we've helped about almost 100,000 people, and we've worked with over 1,000 businesses. And from my personal experience, without the stigma or the fear that he has created around this topic, I have not seen a single case of the companies we work with having any legal action taken against them from hiring all of these formerly incarcerated people.
Thank you, Harley. Rayshun, I saw you shaking your head, so I want to allow you to jump in there in case you had a comment as well.
I do not. Harley said a mouthful there. That is definitely more rooted in stigma and myth than it is actual facts or outcomes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So my next question is to you, Rayshun. So becoming an inclusive hirer consists of more than just overlooking someone's background. What are some other practices that businesses could institute to support those with criminal records?
Absolutely. So you definitely really don't want to, as with any business decision, you don't want to go at this thing haphazard, right? You want to make sure that your company is set up to really be able to support your employees, regardless of what demographic they represent. In this particular instance, we found that it's definitely is the best practices are to first you want to build top to bottom buy-in, right? You want to make sure that the leadership for various reasons to be able for the company culture, for accountability purposes as this thing it grows. You don't want to go it alone. If you haven't done this work before, find a social service organization in your area to really be able to help you support this. People with boots on the ground that really had their ear to some of the ills that this demographic is trying to and barriers that they're trying to overcome and work through. You want to make sure you review your HR policies. And you want to do that with a second chance or fair chance lens. Sometimes this means educating yourself on different little nuances in regard to the criminal justice system, right? And some of the things that people might have to deal with that could potentially show up at work in regard to maybe meeting with parole or probation officers or something to that extent. And of course, you always want to respect and maintain every individual's confidentiality. And also, lastly, I think you want to make sure that you start small, you learn, and you adjust.
Thank you. Megan, we know that individuals that have a prior record, the turnover rate when it comes to employment is typically lower. And for some employers embarking on hiring individuals that have a criminal record, it still feels like a heavy lift. So what resources or support systems do you think are available to assist businesses in successfully integrating individuals with criminal records into their organizations? And feel free to comment on any of the other questions I've asked previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start with your question. You know, when we started, we launched our Second Chance Employers Coalition at the end of 2021. So we have several of our members that are second chance employers and advocate for it on the national level. And with us being in Texas, we really wanted that Texas focused effort. And so since we've launched it officially, and we were very active this year or in 2022 and 2023. I get people reaching out to me like every other day. Hey, this is what I do in this space. So there are a lot of resources out there. We really have what I've noticed works well as a regional focus within the companies, and the companies that I've worked with that maybe don't have the bandwidth to implement nationwide or statewide, start on a regional level. So we try to build out those connections, but there are a ton of wraparound services to assist businesses who have made this decision. There's a lot of internal, policies and work to be done as well, but there's also resources on that as well, how to guide your business in making those decisions and implementing those practices, and how to communicate with your employees and also the public and community about that. And so our goal also is to amplify that message. And I think businesses supporting businesses and being open about it are, JP Morgan Chase, their CEO is always talking about this. There's a national Second Chance Business Coalition that has a lot of resources. So guides on how to implement within your own businesses, connections to, different organizations in different states and on the national level. To help provide, mentorship programs and things of that nature. We're very lucky in Texas because our agencies are very involved. I feel like this has been more of a recent focus, but we work closely with TDCJ because they work with individuals, you know, when they're exiting, re-entering. And so we want to make sure that they're supported as well from the business lens, and we're making those connections as well. So there's a ton of organizations that work with businesses, and they want to hear from your business and partner with you. So it's really making those connections and having conversations like this where people can make connections to work together and be successful implementing, and then continuing to develop it and have the practices that work.
Yeah, thank you. So thinking about a business, who would you say are the best people within a business to actually begin to have those conversations? Would you say it should come from this people in the C-suite or in the TA department? Who do you think are the best people to start that communication?
As far as making the decision for the company or communicating with the community?
But in terms of both, communicating with the community or making the decision to become a second chance hiring organization or business?
Yeah, I think the most important part is that everybody's on the same page. So two of our leading businesses in the Second Chance Employers Coalition, the effort was brought forward by an on-ground strategic initiative HR manager. And so he had to convince the C-suite executives to implement the program community-based in one city in Texas. And then the other company that is a leader, it came from the CEO. And he really did a good job of saying like all of the talking points that you all distribute and promote and advocate for, advocating that within your own company and being a leader from the top. But on the other side, when we had our on-ground manager promote, he showed, you know, he started small, showed that it could work. And sometimes it didn't work right away, but he got there and convinced leadership. And now that message comes from, you know, the C-suite. He calls it the 17th floor of this national company, and they're implementing all over the country. So it can work both ways. And I think the resources with the coalitions that you all are a part of and the national coalition it's really helpful to share that story, but also say, hey, we're not alone. Other companies have done this successfully, and they share those practices. And there's even like on-ramp guides and all of that.
Thank you. And Harley and Rayshun, I know Harley, you've had experience of all 3 states that we're working in. Any resources that you think would be helpful to share, or that you can think of over and above what maybe shared, those helpful ones?
I think I want to start with just a comment on Megan's kind of saying how some companies start with CEO, some start with HR. I think some companies just have a culture inherently where they've kind of always done this, and now they're just putting a name on it. They're going to have it so much easier than someone who's kind of institutionally had a background check that was really rigorous, that they're trying to overcome a decade or 2 of policy that was in place where they were weeding this population out. They're going to have a much harder time than a company who said, yeah, we've hired dozens of people with record. Now we're just trying to put a name on it and a tag on it, brand it, and spread the word. It's going to be easier for them. So they're focused more on PR and marketing and communications, whereas someone who's never really done this before is going to have a lot more work ahead of them and then it also has to do with the size of the company. A small business, you know, at Honest Jobs, we've learned this over the years, is depending on how many, we call it a decision-making framework, how many people are involved in the decision. So when someone applies for that job, if it's a small business, the hiring manager might be the owner of the business, or they might be 1 degree removed from the owner. So it's just a quick email or phone call and they get the approval from the boss and it's good to go. We hired the person. Now, if there's a hiring manager, a recruiting person, talent acquisition manager, HR, legal, compliance, then there's operations, then there's the CEO. Really, the way this works is if any of them are not in alignment, the applicant is likely to fall through the crack at some point in that process. So it becomes exponentially harder to implement as the companies get larger. Now, that doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means that if a big company says, well, we tried it and it didn't work, it could not, doesn't necessarily mean that the candidates weren't great candidates. It could mean that it wasn't effectively managed and implemented. And we've helped really big companies do that. So it's not impossible. It's just that the point remains, like Rayshun said, sometimes you need to find an expert and be willing to invest the time and energy, especially if you're a large company that doesn't have a track record of hiring a lot of people with a record. So I just wanted to share that first. And then in Ohio, he was not lying. Nehemiah Manufacturing has done just such an incredible history in this space, and they have been great thought leaders on it. They have Harvard business case study that you can read up on around Nehemiah Manufacturing in Cincinnati. There's a Harvard business case coming out on my company as well here in about a month or two. Super excited about that. So Cincinnati Works is a great resource. I know they've done wonderful stuff. I haven't stayed up to date in the last 6 months or so, but in Ohio, they are a wonderful resource. And then there's just a lot of content out there around Hot Chicken Takeover, Edwin's Institute in Cleveland. Ohio is really, I would say, kind of the epicenter of second chance hiring. They were kind of ahead of the curve. There was some really big company, or a lot of companies there doing this 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago. So there's quite a big community in Ohio of people that are happy to share knowledge and resources on this topic. And then I've also heard that the DOC in Ohio is more and more open to working collaboratively with businesses. So I was on an advisory committee for the Department of Corrections in Ohio, where your business could submit a request to bring work into the prisons, or to have work release where they would let 10, 20 people out every day to come work at your manufacturing plant or on the work site. So that's a possibility in Ohio. I'm newer to Texas, but I will tell you, the Department of Corrections here seems very open and kind of free. Like, I didn't even fill out paperwork. They let me in. I don't know if I should share that, but one time I went to a prison to volunteer and they didn't even ask me to fill out any paperwork. They just let me in, which was the first time in my life I got to walk into without having my thumbprints and background checks and everything. So that may be a mistake on their part, but I'm hoping it's just the culture is changing to where they want volunteers coming in. They want that coming in. So as far as resources, Honest Jobs is always happy to provide consulting and services. And RBIJ also, my understanding is you guys do want to talk to businesses and help them get started. And both of us, and Cincinnati Works, and even the chamber, is in a good position to help you kind of get that playbook going. I want to wrap it up here soon, but I also believe that, Second Chance Business Coalition has their roadmap that Megan mentioned. I looked at it the other day. It's definitely a good starting point if you really feel like you don't know where to start. And then if you're trying to get corporate buy-in, Jeffrey Korzenik's book, Untapped Talent. Most people on the call may have heard of this, but if you haven't, it's on Amazon. Untapped Talent. It's a wonderful book from Princeton economist explaining why you should hire people with records. So for those executives that need to see the numbers and the math and the economics of it all, it can be a wonderful tool.
Fantastic. Thanks, Harley. You've shared lots of resources there, and one little secret, which we won't say anything about you being a volunteer and getting into the DOC. Thank you for those sharing that information. So there's some complexities, although there's a lot of resources out there that companies can tap into. So that's really good to hear.
And I want to add one more thing. I'm so sorry, but the organization I'm volunteering with is the Prison Entrepreneurship Program in Texas. And it's a wonderful program. A lot of the people graduating the program are starting companies, but many of them are looking for a job as well. And they're looking for employment. They have a wonderful program, and they also provide support services to them when they come home. So they're stable. They have a network of professionals helping them be stable in their life. So I've been volunteering with them, and they have graduates going home to Dallas, Houston, Austin. So they can be a wonderful resource, and they love having additional volunteers as well as hiring companies come to them.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So I wanted to move the conversation to talk a little bit about the collateral consequences of incarceration or having a criminal record. So even when employers or local businesses want to hire people with records, sometimes there's state regulations that can get in the way. For example, barring people with a criminal record from receiving an occupational license, or suspending a driver's license for unpaid court fees. That can really have an impact on somebody's life. So what role can businesses play in advocating for policy change? So I want to throw that open, Rayshun or Harley or Megan, if there's some feedback that you can share that might be helpful for the guests on the call.
Absolutely. I'd love to take that one. So you definitely, you want to the key is education. right, around the topic, understanding what barriers are that's really disparaging people and keeping them in a place of where they're feeling disenfranchised. One of the biggest collateral consequences of incarceration that's been prohibited from keeping people from really being able to excel in the workforce is actually the question on the renter's application. We see this a lot, where we have people that can't even, regardless of what their dreams and aspirations are, they're barred from living in safe neighborhoods, from being able to get to a place of stability, to where they can really find their footing in the workforce, right? And get the opportunity to grow and get that economic mobility. We found that to be, well, that's a very challenging collateral consequence of being formally incarcerated. And I would definitely ask any business leaders that had any type of voice in that policy space to really see if there's a way for you to have your voice heard, and to really understand how the impact that is having on your frontline, on a lot of your frontline workforce, and do something about it. There are other topics like bail reform. You mentioned the driver's license issue. These are shell games of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like, we want people to be able to get to a point of self-sustainability and success, but yet and still we have policies in place that's keeping them from being able to get what they need in order to be able to get to that place, right? We want people to work and to be able to pay taxes and contribute to capitalism, but yet and still we won't allow them to operate a motor vehicle for something, for a fine, right? So those are just a couple of the things, just a couple of those collateral consequences that you mentioned, that it would really serve the business community well to really just jump in that fight and to support and advocate for change.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll add on to that as well, because about 4 years ago, we were, having conversations. And so we convene our policy committees to hear from businesses. Well, there were businesses that wanted to be active in this space, except the applicant couldn't fill out the application because they didn't have not a driver's license, but an ID, like proof of identification. And so it was really removing some of these barriers that were very surprising, that was even a situation. And so we worked really hard to pass a bill that just made the Department of Criminal Justice prioritize making sure that people leaving had an identification card, whatever that looks like. And also, if it's an ID for some, there's different reasons that there are barriers for getting your driver's license, which we're working on that as well. We're not there yet in Texas, but it's something we've been advocating for, and we almost got there this session. But even if it's, just your ID, or even your the system ID, and being able to use that just to fill out applications to get transportation, housing, and a job. And so that was something that we advocated for. And then most recently, when we're having conversations with the licensing and regulation agency, they go in and there's programs. We support expanding workforce and occupational licensing in prisons, but we realized that you weren't able to apply for that occupational license while you were incarcerated. So you have the training, you get out, you maybe don't have the resources right away, and then you have to wait months to get this license when there are companies that want to hire you immediately. And so that was a barrier that, is like a common sense kind of easy fix that we were able to do through the statute. Like, you are allowed to apply while you're there, so you have that license immediately upon reentering. And so those were some of our priorities that we advocated for. And it's stuff like that, looking for things like that, and also having the conversations. So, with the different agencies and whatnot, we convene Texas Workforce Commission, the Criminal Justice Department, and TDLR, Licensing and Regulation. So we convene every 4 to 6 weeks, so everyone knows what people are working on. And TWC, our Workforce Commission, is very active in this as well. But just one note on that, during one of these meetings where everyone's kind of catching up. Oh, you're doing that as well. Well, why don't we just work together so two people aren't doing the same thing and not communicating about it? That's very helpful. But we noticed there was a federal issue on social security cards. And we hadn't realized that, it was holding up progress within the agencies. And so that was something that we could advocate for on the federal side. And it was a simple fix, like it was an oversight and an MOU. And there's a certain number of social security cards that you can get in your whole lifetime. And so looking at that and figuring out that didn't even have to be a law that was changed. It was just simply an unintended consequence, and a barrier. So I think it's important to have the conversations, share, we shared the critical document information about IDs with our members, and everyone was on the same page. This is something that TAB needs to really take a lead on, making sure this law gets passed. So
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it, for somebody that's being released from the carceral system, for them to have an ID, right? That's the starting point for most people, right? They need a job, they need ID to get into lots of different places. So thank you for sharing that, Megan. That's really helpful. Harley, was there something you wanted to add? Yeah.
Here, some people who I am, follow me online. You probably saw recently I shared that I was incarcerated almost 13 years ago for a drug charge, and I got denied an apartment about 3 weeks ago. I was applying, and I have a 790 credit score, good income. My record's from over 10 years ago, nonviolent, and I was being denied. So it just shows you the magnitude of the challenges people face when they come home, not just a job, but finding a place. And sometimes you get a job offer and you're trying to figure out where you're going to live to go, like you need to move there, and you can't move there because you can't find a place to live, and then you end up losing a job. So it seems like it's not connected to the business community. Like, okay, that's not relevant for workforce. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how to find employees, but it really is relevant. It's restricting the open flow of labor in the market, which when the labor market can flow openly, you benefit. You find more workers, wages are easier on you. The other one I want to highlight was I was in DC this week, and Senator Trone from Maryland, who started Total Wine and More, he has a task force that's kind of on the low right now. It's not talked about a whole lot, but it's half Democrats, half Republicans, and it's all around criminal workforce bills. And they're pushing for a universal ID for the BOP. So anyone who comes home from the BOP would come home with an ID that can work in all 50 states. So that's a really big thing that I haven't heard the language on the bill yet, but I'm really excited about it because it would make it so much easier. They can get into the workforce months faster than they could without that ID. So, and then the other piece no one talked about, I just want to highlight is, I know it's not a key initiative right now, but I believe that people shouldn't have to pay to get a GED incarcerated. If we're going to spend billions of dollars to incarcerate people, can we at least help them get the basic education they need to just be productive in the workforce? I recently learned that there's over a dozen states that charge over $100, $200, $500 to get your GED while you're in jail or prison. And it feels like an easy opportunity to help people be more employable in a way that I think most people believe in. And then the last thing is occupational licensing. I just believe that it's rooted in non-free market. It's rooted in government regulation and capture. People had the opportunity to advocate for occupational licenses because it benefited a small number of people. And it certainly doesn't benefit you as a business owner to say there's a bunch of people that could never fill these jobs for something that 80% of the time isn't really relevant. If they can do the job, they're ready to work, they have the skills you need, the government shouldn't stop them from filling your job. So I fully support in Georgia the occupational licensing reform. And if you're a business owner, I think you should too. And I'd be happy to talk more to you about why you should if you're on the fence.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to leave some time for questions and answers. We have quite a few questions in the Q&A box. All right, so I'm going to kick off with the first one, which is, how do you prepare our job seekers to market their brand to the employers? And also, how can we eliminate the fears for employers to understand that they have valuable resources such as SHRM Foundation getting talent back to work? So how do we prepare job seekers to market their brand?
yeah, so there's a lot of different like are people looking to to work and how to market themselves. Is that what we're?
Yeah.
I think so. There's a lot of wraparound. There's a lot of organizations that work on this and also work with our agencies throughout the process. And then I also think, there's employers have a role here as well to help, their employees that are either looking for upward mobility on what that looks like and coaching there and kind of weaving in to a question on internal practices. I think what makes an employer successful is having an internal, employment development program. So whether that's mentorship or coaching, but also an upward mobility plan, and that applies to everybody. And so a question that we get asked from our employers in the coalition is, if you're a second chance hiring employer, does that can you fill any position? And the answer should be yes. And so working with companies to do that, but also having employers be openly speaking and working with organizations to help develop job seekers and how they can promote themselves, by advocating or by educating people what employers are looking for and how that, leads to success.
Thank you. And I think also once a business does employ an individual that has a prior record, think about opportunities for mentorship, to help develop skills that individual might have, or that, that they can sell to a potential next employer or use while they're working for that particular employer. So I think there are certain resources that businesses can employ to assist individuals that have prior records.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So another question here, I'll throw this to Rayshun and or Harley. What if I, as a small business, want to lend my support, although I don't have much time or resources? Is there anything I can do outside of this?
So I just kind of want to go back to find that community partner. Find the people that are actively engaged in the work. Learn who the other fair chance employers are local, close to you. Had an opportunity to connect with those employers and learn from them. Learn what exactly there is that they're doing. You can always use your voice. You can always be an advocate. You use your website. Speak out when an opportunity arises. Those are that's just kind of the low-hanging fruit of what you can do to really kind of push this forward. Definitely knowing that what really prevents a lot of employers from even going down this pathway is the stigma. Don't just take our word for it. The research is out there, right? Understand that the stigma is really rooted in just that myth. And then if you're not actively like debunking it, then unfortunately you're perpetuating it, right? So do what you can, right? So use your voice, advocate. That's my biggest. If you're not in a position to actively hire, then advocate.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is, I know a lot of people who care about the issue, but they're really a small business owner, meaning that they're a solo entrepreneur, or they're just not in a position to hire anybody. And I just want to say, from like the lens of RBIJ, just lending your voice and your logo as another business in a state that they can tap when the timing is right. I can tell you, you're in good hands. They respect and understand the value that you've built in your company, and they're going to act in your best behalf. They've always asked my permission and really cared for the businesses that they work with. So if you're just a small business owner, maybe you can't hire, but you care enough to say, here's my logo, I want to sign up. If there's ever a bill in my state, let me know. And they've made it very easy to just say, yes, I want to support that. And that's enough for them to throw another logo up and say, more small business owners in the state of Texas or Georgia or Ohio want this passed. That's really valuable, because the legislatures, they move for businesses more than they move for a person. There's plenty of formerly incarcerated people that are angry with the system and want it to change. But when they start seeing business owners from their constituents, they tend to listen a lot more.
Thank you. Thank you all. Another question here. I'm not sure if you're able to answer this question. Is there data on the number of justice impacted people who have been hired and still employed by companies who are part of the Second Chance Business Coalition?
So the last time that I checked the website, they had some data on there regarding the outcomes and retention. So I think I'm pretty confident that that's fairly visible on their website, Second Chance Business Coalition.
Yes, and SHRM has a lot of great statistics, but also some of our larger companies that are second chance employers don't keep that data because they don't want their employees to feel like they're being tracked. But the general consensus is in the research like that SHRM has put out is the retention rate is extremely high.
I think we have time for one more question. I'm just going to jump to the end here. So somebody from Cleveland, we have a successful program with a state prison here in Cleveland where incarcerated women have work release and come to our office every day. One of the main challenges have been, once they are released, the challenges of re-entry become a bigger impact in their life, and they've lost a couple of them as employees. Any suggestions that the panel has on what we can, as a business, do to impact recently released employees and encourage them to stay at our business after they're released?
Yeah, I think this also is a good tie back to the kind of what someone to brand themselves as employable. Like, one of the most important things is they can have everything they need to succeed. They can be educated, they can be skilled, but what a lot of people lack coming home from jail and prison is a social network, a network of professionals. We all have hard times in lives. We have family members, we have professional networks that we lean on sometimes. And when people come home from prison, they're really starting over at the bottom of society. Like, very few people are there for them, and the people they do know are often at the bottom of the workforce. They have lower education, lower income, lower resources. So if you have the capacity at your organization to offer a emergency network, like there's a couple people that just say, hey, anyone in this group, if you need something, call us, text us. Like, we're here, we will do our best to help you. Obviously, you want to make sure you're not giving people money for, there's a line you have to draw on this. But I remember when I first got my first professional job after prison, one of the other operations managers came to me and was like, we hired you because you are capable and qualified. You're one of us. We don't want you to feel like you're other, like you're one of us now, and we're here for you. If you need anything, just let us know. And that changed my whole mentality about staying with that employer, and the value of the employment wasn't just it's a job. It's I have someone who wants to see me succeed. So if you're able to establish any type of outreach to where, like, if they're going through crisis, they can call you. We do that for a lot of the job seekers we place, where we say we're there for them for the first 90 days on the job. We send them a text once a week. We get on a call with them. And we found that just the perception of help really helps them show up the next day when they felt like maybe they didn't want to, or, call in to let you know they're going to be 2 hours late, rather than just assuming they're going to get fired. So they just didn't come because they knew they were going to get fired. Little things like that can be really helpful.
To tag on to that, about, assumptions within the workplace, I think making sure that your team or manager is asking the right questions, so the employee isn't nervous to, choose work or a parole appointment. And then also, I think it goes back to housing as well, and that is a policy issue with records and whatnot, but foundational housing, I think, is important. Obviously, when you're moving on to build your professional career outside of the system, you need all of that working together. So thanks for mentioning the housing thing. And that's an issue we need to work on policy-wise in Texas.
Absolutely. And just to kind of build on that, I think we all know that when our lives are not set up the way that we would like for them to be, work can just become another barrier. right? So it's really about like just listening, um, establishing that relational capital, understanding what people are going with. And if you as an employer are in a position to be able to be able to bring in additional wraparound supports that your company may not already have, or if you have a close enough relationship with a human service organization in your area to bring in additional wraparound supports, it would certainly behoove you to bring those in and support your people the best way that you can.
I want to share one other kind of counterintuitive thing that I don't see. It's not like the most common trend, but I've seen it several times where companies want to do this work and they start talking to formerly incarcerated job applicants and they lower the bar because they're trying to do social good. Now, don't do that. You know, if people are not if they are not ready for that job and they're not qualified, and it appears that they are not ready and qualified, you're going to get a bad taste in your mouth when you hire someone who doesn't perform or can't perform. And that's not their fault. That's yours. If you're a hiring manager and you choose to bring on people that you set up for failure. So I'm not saying that's what happened in any of these instances, but I have actually met employers who brought in people and then expected them to do stuff that they weren't set up for success for. So one is, you know, if you have all the wraparound support and services in place and you have all of this, maybe you can accommodate a broader group of people. But if you don't have all that, you can still hire formerly incarcerated people. You just need to have the bar needs to be the same as anyone without a record, where you're looking for someone who has that experience or that skill set that you require for the job. So I know that seems so elementary, but we've seen people who committed to second chance hiring kind of force it. And then they think, oh, well, it doesn't work. It's a bad practice. And it's really not. For the Second Chance Business Coalition, you know, I can share a little bit of data. We work with about a dozen of the companies from the coalition, and you know, Coke Industries is one of the best examples because they're not publicly traded; they're private, so they're a lot more open with the data. They have hired hundreds of people from professional IT and accounting down to entry-level manufacturing, and they have exceptionally high retention rates. I mean, it's phenomenal, and they brag about it openly. And that's kind of a glimpse behind the curtain that you may not get that same insight with some of the private companies just because they have stock prices and shareholders and all of that. But many of those companies have taken longer than expected because these are Fortune 500 companies, right? They have 300 people that all need to be on the same page to effectively do this versus a small business. But we are seeing many of them making that progress 2-3 years in, where they are rubber's meeting the road, they're hiring people, and they are seeing the positive results that we would expect them to see.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Harley, to hear that. And you know, I think that helps to eliminate some of the fears that employers might have about hiring individuals who have a prior record. We've gone over time a little for the panel section, but I just wanted to flag that somebody had made a comment in the Q&A to let the attendees know about the federal bonding and work opportunity tax credit that employers can benefit from. You know, to eliminate and help eliminate some of their fears employers have. But we can certainly send out some links to some helpful documents or helpful resources after this call, because there may be some employers on this call that would like to hear a little bit more about the federal bonding and work opportunity tax credit. So we can do that after this call. So I did want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and answering the questions. And for the next few minutes, we're just going to spend a little bit of time with the team, and they're just going to share some information about our second chance hiring program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaz. On behalf of the RBIJ team and our inclusive hiring team, we really want to thank you all for attending and the panelists for being so candid about what's happening in the workforce. Wanted to take some time to introduce you to the entire inclusive hiring team. So you were able to see and hear a little bit from Kaz Walcott, who's the director of hiring for inclusive hiring. We have Taja, who's supporting the work in Texas. Myself, I support the work in Georgia and Ohio. And Heather Galetti, and she supports our special projects. So really appreciative of everyone's attendance and time, and the entire RBIJ team, Megan, who supports our policy work. Just in terms of next steps, please, if you haven't already, explore our website, where you'll be able to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. And then there you'll have an opportunity to access our Second Chance portal, where you can submit inquiries about any of the second chance work that we're doing here at RBIJ, to learn more about the work that's being done in the individual states that I mentioned. Tasha's email is on there. She supports the work in Texas, as mentioned before, and my email is there as well to find out more information about Georgia and Ohio. If you are interested in being a part of our Workforce and Justice group, please log on to LinkedIn. Check on our website where you'll be able to explore a little bit more about that group and be able to sign up. We will really appreciate any feedback you may have. Send us all an email. To connect with Morgan for policy information, her email is there as well. And on behalf of everyone here at RBIJ, just really appreciative for us to gain an opportunity to expand our circle of influence and provide you all an opportunity to share your experience. In terms of next steps, as mentioned, this is our kickoff for our new Second Chance hiring program, which we're starting again in Georgia, Texas, and Ohio. This program will offer consultation to businesses looking to begin or expand opportunities for system-impacted individuals in their workforce and truly become inclusive hirers. This is all free of charge. And as we navigate and move forward, we would like to introduce the program to anyone within your circle that may not be aware. So again, please reach out to us so we can continue the dialogue, and let's not stop the conversation here, because the goal is to expand our circle of influence. So on behalf of the entire RBIJ team, we thank you, and we hope you all have a peaceful, restful remainder of the year, and Happy New Year. Thank you all.